Hello and welcome to the Polk Pioneer Oral History Program. This is a collaboration between the Polk County Historical Association and the Polk County History Center. I am LuAnn Mims, the Research and Genealogy Historian in the History and Genealogy Library at the Polk County History Center. Thank you for joining us today as I have the pleasure to speak with Miss Shirley Dixon Williams, a lifelong resident of Polk County. She will be sharing her personal memories about growing up in this county, what schools she attended, her family life, and other interesting places, people, and events. Thank you for joining me today, Miss Williams. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
That's great. Let's start off a little bit about telling us when you were born and where you were born.
I was born in Winter Haven at a nurse's home. There was not a hospital, and Grace Marshall opened her home on Lake Cannon, and the women could come and have their babies and stay there for a week or so, and before they went home, because then you didn't go home the second day. So that's where I was born in 1929, almost 87 years ago. So I'll soon have my 87th birthday. Can't believe it.
Tell me a little bit about your father. Was he a Polk County resident or native?
He was not a native. In 1916, his family came from Oklahoma. He was 14 years old, and they came from Oklahoma across, I don't know how they got to New Orleans, by wagon, I suppose, and across the Gulf and into Tampa, and then by wagon to Winter Haven. And my grandfather's health was not good. He was asthmatic, and he needed to come to Florida. And so he bought a house on Lake Buckeye, which is northeast of Winter Haven, and that's where they lived until, well, my grandmother died in 1960, and then they sold the house. So he came from a farm, had 3 brothers and a sister who stayed on the farm because she was already married. So,
what kind of work did he do?
Well, he worked for the city of Winter Haven when he first went to work after high school. He went to the local school and graduated in 1921 and went to work for the city of Winter Haven. And one of his jobs, because he could hold his breath long, he helped build the first dock that was built in Lake Martha. And it is gone now, of course, but he said that was his one claim to fame. So, and then he went to work for Christ Auto Supply, was auto parts, and he did auto glass work. And he worked there until during the war, he went to work at Food Machinery as an inspector. They made tanks over there in Lakeland. And then in '45, when the war was over, he left that business and opened his own auto glass business, Dixon Glass Service. And he worked until the afternoon that he went into the hospital for a checkup in 1978, and then had a heart attack the next morning and passed away. And so he had lived all of his teenage years and up until he was 75. So
he survived through the Great Depression.
Oh, yes.
Brought his family through with all of these different jobs. Do
Yes.
you have any memories of being, in the Depression?
No, I don't. I guess I was too young. I really never, until I was grown, I never knew we were poor. But we were poor. But I never went without shoes. I never went without clothes. My mother did sew. And there were three of us, my sister and brother and I, and we never missed a meal. And he brought home from Christ Auto, that's one pay that I do remember, that he worked for a week for $32.50. I'd sure hate to try to get by on that now.
Wow.
So.
Tell me a little bit more about your mother. Was she from Polk County?
No, my mother was a Canadian. Her father and mother came to Florida they went to Cuba first and lived for a year, and they didn't like Cuba, so they went back to Canada. And then in 1920, they came to Winter Haven and bought a house right in downtown. And a couple of years later, my mother came to visit them. She said she wasn't going to go live in that forsaken country of Florida. Well, she came down and got to meet the young people, and she never went back. And so she came in 23 and met Daddy, and they married in 1926. And I can remember as a child, a little child, that this huge Border Patrol officer came to our front door. It seems that my mother made an illegal entry because she never went back. She came in as a visitor and she never went back. But she had married an American, and so that was her first paper. So she immediately filed and got her citizenship.
What was her name?
Edna Robson Dixon.
And your dad's name?
Judd Arthur Dixon.
And you said you had 3 siblings? Or
I have 2. I had a brother and a sister, an older sister and a younger brother. And my older sister lives in Miami. We lost my brother in '88. He had an aneurysm 15 years before that, and it left him blind and no current memory. So he was in a nursing home all those years. But he had a family. He was married and had 3 children of his own. And in fact, I'm going to go see the youngest child, who was 2 when he passed away. And I haven't seen her for about 5 years, and so I'm looking forward to getting together with her again.
So the 3 kids in your family, whereabouts in Winter Haven was your house?
It was what was then the golf course out, which is now Polk Community, excuse me, Polk State College. And our house was the last house on the street. There was ours and the one next to it, and the one around the corner, and that's all the houses there were. And so we were out in the country basically. And I rode my bicycle everywhere, and my grandparents' house over on Lake Buckeye was about a half a mile, and I'd ride over there on my bicycle to see them.
What schools did you go to? Well,
I went to what is now the post office. It was Central Grammar from 1st through 6th grade, rode my bicycle every day, and then I went to the high school, which is behind where Denison is, by the Denison Field. Went to junior high, it was called then, it's now middle school, and then high school. And finished high school in 1947. We had a class of 108.
Wow. Well, what kind of subjects did you like in school?
Well, I like math, and I wanted to be a secretary, so I took the business course and learned shorthand and typing, and that I still use that a good bit today. And I enjoyed home ec because I was wanting to learn to sew, and I still use my sewing. I do sewing now for friends. And
what kind of hobbies did you have?
Hobbies, well, like I say,
activities.
Yeah, we rode bicycles, we swam in the lakes, and people now today say, how could you swim in those lakes with all those gators? Well, we didn't know any different. We just swam, and because I lived just a block up from the lake on both sides. There was Lake Martha on one side and Lake Elbert on the other. And in high school, it was during the war, and we had a rec room downtown where we had a jukebox, and we would go and get together. I was cheerleader in high school, which was a joy of my life, and so it was just when we went, I think so much about Kissingen Springs. So many people have talked about it, and that was such a favorite place. And for it to dry up like it did, they had a good dance floor and a good jukebox, and we loved to go down there and dance.
So it was more than just having the water activities there?
Yes, it was just a fun place to be. We could all get together and let out, and then I was active in my church, First Baptist Church, downtown Winter Haven. I was baptized there. I was married there, and then we broke away from there about 40 years ago and went out to a Calvary Baptist church where I'm still a member.
Do you keep up with any of your high school friends?
Yes, we do. We started out about 10 of us meeting for lunch once a month. Well, it's gotten down now, it's about 5 or 6. But we keep in touch, and it's fun to get together and recall the things that we did when in high school. We had a good high school. And one of my dearest friends that I was so friendly with in high school passed away just a couple of years ago, and it just broke my heart. And I still talk about once a month with one who lives in Raleigh now. So it's just she and I that are left. The others are those favorite of our 5, the famous 5. There's just 2 of us left now, so we talk quite often.
So tell me a little bit about what was Winter Haven like when you were growing up as a child? What do you remember about the downtown area?
Winter Haven was a very small town when I was growing up, and our claim to fame was the first Publix. I can remember going to the first Publix with my grandmother. It wasn't even called Publix at that time, and George Jenkins himself carried her groceries out to the car. And that sticks in my mind. Every time I see his picture, I think, well, I knew George when. And but then the building started, people started coming, and during the war we had Bartow Air Base, and that was, we had a prisoner of war prison down just off Lake Silver. I can remember that, seeing those. And I thought, those Germans, they were, awful people, but they were boys. They were boys just like the ones I went to school with. They were not bad people, but that's a very vivid memory of seeing those prisoners out there. And about twice a week, they would close the beach at Lake Silver, and they would go down, they would let the prisoners go and swim. And so and that was where they were living in the Orange Festival buildings where they had the displays. That was what they were used during
the Orange Dome?
No, the Orange Festival downtown was down where the City Hall is now. And the buildings are gone. They tore them down, but they had fruit displays, and that was where it was, just right at past that one. Well, it's on just past Avenue D.
Where would you go to buy your school supplies or your shoes or your clothes?
Well, downtown, real fancy times, we would drive to Lakeland. And I can remember when I was married and had children, we would go to Tampa to do Christmas shopping, because they had more of a pick of what to get. But we had maybe 2 grocery stores, and it was a very small town.
Can you think of a name of any of the stores?
Well, there was a Margaret Ann, and then we had like I say, the first Publix was built here, and downtown Barkins and Euler's, and one of the Euler girls is still, I think she's 98, 99, 100 years old, and she's still living, and she's not real spry, but we used to go in. That was a very fancy store. And Catherine's, when I was a teenager, we would go to Catherine's, and like I say, my mother made a lot of my clothes, full skirts, and the shoes. Story's, Mr. Story had a shoe shop, and we.
Was there a special place to go and have dinner, either with your group of friends in high school or as a family meal?
The Hobnob, which was really not something that I went to, because that was a very wild place. But we didn't have McDonald's. I can't remember whether there was, and I don't think there was any fast food. Well, Sundown, they had it was a drive-in. And
like a movie theater, or a place to eat?
A place to eat.
Okay.
And then there was the Ritz Theater and the Grand Theater, where we could take a quarter when I was little and go to the Ritz Theater and see a movie, and then walk on over to the Grand Theater and go to see a movie there, and have popcorn at both places, and come home with a nickel. So it was, the serials were on at the Grand Theater, and everybody had to go every Saturday to see the serial.
What would be a fun trip for your family?
Daytona Beach and St. Pete Beach. I remember we'd always go for a week over at Treasure Island, which was there then, and I can still go to this day and find the house that we used to rent for a week. It's now a little shop, but it's on that curve, and I can find it and still go there. So that was, I never went out of the state until I was 16. And I was a tobacco girl in 45. And I went up to Massachusetts, to Amherst, Massachusetts, and worked in the tobacco because all the men were in the service. And so one summer, my 16th summer, I went up there and worked in the tobacco fields. And I still see people today that went on that trip with us.
Did you go by train?
Yes, we took the train. I had never been on a train before. I had never been out of the state of Florida. And I was so excited. And I got to Massachusetts, and I got into the shower that first night. And I said, what in the world are you doing so far away from home? And I can remember that I cried and cried in the shower. And I came out, and we were so busy, I wasn't homesick anymore. And I had my 16th birthday up there, and then we came home on the train, stopped in New York City for 2 days. My mother said if she'd known we were going to do that, she wouldn't have let me go, but it was a great memory to go see that big city that I had never seen before. We had a great time.
Were you paid for this experience?
Oh yes, I think I came home with $5.50. We were paid very little, but we stayed in a fraternity house. And of course our meals were supplied and all our supplies. And all we had to do was keep our clothes clean and go out there and work in the fields. And like I say, I think I had $5.51 when I got home for the summer work.
Well, I know you mentioned a lot of buildings have gone by the wayside.
Yes.
Is there a couple that you can recall that were really important to you but are now no longer there?
Well, our city hall, Popeye's Chicken is there now, and I just hate that we lost that building. It was such a nice building. It was the city hall and the police department and the fire department, and my dad was a volunteer fireman. And I have great memories of seeing the trucks pull out of there and go to the fires.
What street was that on?
That was at Central and 6th Street, which is now Popeye's Chicken. Mm-hmm. And that was a terrible loss to the city, to lose that building. And I guess that's now the Nora Mayo Hall stands empty, and I hope we can buy that and refurbish it and keep it that way.
You mentioned your church affiliation.
Yes.
Has there been much changes with the structure of that church?
Yes, the building that I that I was baptized in is gone, and the new building has been built. And I can't remember what year it was, but it was right across the new Publix. The first Publix was right across the street from the First Baptist Church. And so now, and then we left the church about 40 years ago. We went and started a new church, Calvary Baptist, and I'm still a member there, out east of town.
I had recently read something about the Publix and the Baptist church, so I was wondering if you had remembered.
Oh
that.
yes, and that Publix had the first electric eye doors. And they had also a donut machine that the dough was mixed, and then it was put in the machine, and it dropped each thing and went all the way around a circle. And when it flipped over halfway through, and when they got through, the donuts were done, and we stood and waited so we could get a good hot donut. And Ms. Brownie was the donut lady at Publix.
Was this a machine, or was this?
It was a machine, and I'd have never seen one since. And I don't know, I wish I knew where that went. And one thing I wish I had, LuAnn, is a dater pencil from the library. I just thought that was the neatest thing. It was a pencil with a date attached to it, and they would hit the date and then they would write. Hit the date and write. And I wish I could find one. I would dearly love to have one, just to have it, because I was an avid reader and was at the library a lot.
So was this a giveaway, or was this something that was just at?
No, it was just something they used. The people who worked there, so they could they had to change the date every day, so they would tell when it was due.
Mm-hmm.
And then
you were in high school during World War II.
yes.
Do you have any memories, early memories of the onset of the war?
I can remember when the president in '41 announced that we were at war, that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and I thought, well, that's terrible. He sounds so grim, but I didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. That was a world away. And so I know that a lot of the boys, well, not the boys in my class, the older ones were called into the service. And but my class, a lot of them did go in the service, but not until after they graduated, because then they'd have to do the draft, or miss the draft.
I wondered how that impacted your high school years, because you were like maybe 12 or 13 at the beginning of the war.
Well, high school years, that was 12 or 13, I was in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 16, 17 when I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't do too much, because, like I say, most of the boys weren't old enough to go in the draft until after we had graduated. But some of the boys did, and we missed them. But I was too young to go to the USO dances for the boys from Bartow Air Base. A lot of the older girls met and married, a lot of them married the boys from Bartow Air Base.
How about the concept of rationing with the stamps?
Yes, we had stamps, and I found a few the other day, and I put them in the museum. I took them down and we put them in the Winter Haven Museum. But Mother was smart enough to be able to cook for us and not suffer too much from the ration. I don't really recall missing anything. Sugar was short, but we managed.
Did it change your idea about what you were going to do after high school?
No, I wanted to be a secretary, so I took the secretarial training, but my folks were not able to send me to college. And so all I wanted was to find the right man and get married and have my family, and that's what I did.
So what year did you get married?
I got married in 1948. I graduated in '47 and got married the next year in November. My husband had been in the Marines, and he came home, and I met him at church, and we got married in November of 1948. And I had my first child in November of 1949. I used to get so mad at my husband. He'd say, well, we were married November the 13th, and our first child was born the 29th of November. He neglected to say that it was a year later. And that was bad back then.
What was your husband's name?
Name was Jerome Williams. He was raised in Bartow, came to Winter Haven in his senior year in high school, and was very popular. He did not know me, but I knew him because I was a freshman. And I knew him. He was king of the homecoming court, and he played football, and then he went into the service. And so I was very impressed with him and was glad to meet him. And
you guys met at church?
Yes.
Was there a specific activity you were doing?
BYPU, Baptist Young People's Union. And we had that was where we had our picnics and our parties and our Halloween parties, and we had a great group, and I still see a lot of those people today.
And you were married at the church?
At the First Baptist Church.
And how many children did you end up having?
We had 4 children. We had a boy, and then a girl, and then another boy, and another boy. The youngest boy, I had already picked out. I was supposed to have a boy, girl, and so it was going to be Nancy. Well, when he was born, I decided he didn't want to go through life as Nancy, so he was David. That was our youngest son. That was the one we lost, and about 35 years ago. But we had a great neighborhood. Those kids had friends. There must have been 15 kids in the neighborhood within a 4-block area, and they would swim together down at the lake, and they'd have breakfast and they'd be gone, and sometimes we wouldn't see them again until supper time, but they knew they better be there at supper time.
And what neighborhood was this?
This was the neighborhood out near the college. That's where I've been all my life.
How long have you been in that house?
Been in that house since I was 4 months old, except for 2 years. When we were first married, we lived out in Inwood, and then my mother passed away, and I went home to keep house. We moved back so I could keep house for my dad and my brother. And then my brother, I just thought we'd be there a while, and then we'd find our place. Well, my brother went to college, got married. My grandmother passed away, and my dad went to live with his sister. So we just bought the house from Daddy, and I'm still there. Same house.
Your husband was a Marine. What did he do after the war?
After the war, he had a few jobs around, and then Tampa Electric, he went there one day to see if he'd get a job, and they took him on as a groundman, and then he made lineman, and then he was with them for 35 years. He retired in 1989 after 35 years of service with Tampa Electric. And some friends that we still see today were made from that. He was a good worker. He was loyal, and I never thought when he started that he would ever last that long. He worked for Seaboard before that. He was in the office at the Seaboard. But he didn't like that because he'd keep getting rolled out of his job, and he had to go to Wildwood, and we went to West Palm for a couple months, and then he got rolled out of that job, so he came home and he said, "This is it, I'm gonna go find another job." So that's when he went to work for Tampa Electric.
Did Tampa Electric serve Winter Haven?
Yes. Yes, there was an office here, and in fact my uncle worked for Tampa Electric too, and the office was downtown, and then they went out on Lake Silver, and then they built the new place where Jerome did most of his work. But it was a good job, and we have a good pension. And
now, did you ever work?
Yes, I did. When I was first out of high school, I went to work as secretary to Dr. Stovall at First Baptist Church. And then I just worked that summer because he retired in September. And so then I worked for Cooter Citrus out in Lake Alfred as a telephone receptionist.
Wow.
And worked the switchboard.
What would you have to do on that?
Well, I answered all the phone. I had to get other people to when the calls came in, I'd have to ring their office and get them to talk. And that was a happy group. We really had a happy group, and I helped one of the girls who had to keep track of all the shipments that went in and out, and I was learning that, and then it came time to get married, and I left, and I didn't work again until our youngest was 11 years old. I was able to stay at home until he was up and not little anymore. And then I went to work for Mrs. Ruth Gould Moore. She was national president of a national musical fraternity, Sigma Alpha Iota. And I worked with her for 10 years while she was president. And then now I work at home. I'm a seamstress. I do alterations for friends, and I love my sewing machine. I've got it in front of a window that I can look out and watch the neighborhood, and I still sew. I sew slower now than I used to, but I still sew. I love to sew.
That period of time that you weren't working and you were raising your children, did you do any volunteer work?
No, back then, no, I didn't. I just had to keep tabs on those 4 children. And I can't remember, well, of course I had their laundry and the house to keep clean, and did a lot of the yard work because Jerome was, working away. So no, I didn't. I went to the church. Of course, we were active in First Baptist Church. Dr. Carnett was there, and he was a very precious man to us. In fact, my youngest son was named after him, David Albert Williams.
With your young family, where were some favorite spots to go to in Polk County, like to enjoy? Was Kissingen still there?
Kissingen Springs, we went to the local Lake Silver. I had swum a lot in Lake Silver. I was one of the swimmers that Annabelle Weber, we had a synchronized swimming group. And we did a movie one time, went out to Cypress Gardens and made a movie of the synchronized swimming. And it went, Grantland Rice, I think, was the producer of that. And I can remember they said, "Oh, you must have made good money." And I said, "Yeah, we got a bathing suit." Dick Pope gave us a bathing suit apiece, and we swam in those muddy canals, and it was fun.
So you met Dick Pope, too?
Yes, oh yes, I used to babysit for his children. They lived just 2 blocks from me, and I would go down when they wanted to go out somewhere, and the son was 16, but they didn't really trust him with his sister. So I'd go and I sew for her now too, Adrienne Watkins. I still sew for her. And yes, I knew Dick Pope well.
Wow. And you got to swim at Cypress in a synchro team?
Synchronized swimming, yes.
Did you do any water skiing?
I never could water ski. I tried. My children were expert at it. I could not, I could barely get up, and then I would fall, and finally I just gave up as a bad job, and I do not ski. I don't know why I could never. I was scared of it, I guess. So I did not ski.
Well, also thinking about your children being young, kind of describe downtown Winter Haven at this period of time. What was still there, and what was new?
Well, not much. It was still a small town. They rode their bicycles everywhere. We only had 1 car, and so they would ride their bicycles to go to the movie. In fact, when I was dating, we usually went on bicycles on a date down to the movie. So, but they were. My oldest son graduated in '67, 20 years after I did. A lot of his friends are still here, and I hear from them and see them a lot. And my daughter was a musician. She wanted to play the piano. And so we found a teacher, and so she would take her $3. It was $3 for a half an hour. Now that was a lot of money. And sometimes I had trouble coming up with that $3. And the teacher said, "Shirley, I'll send you a bill every month." And I said, "You better take the $3 when she brings it, because I may not have it at the end of the month." But she went on, a beautiful musician, went on and got her master's at Southern Seminary in Louisville, and then was a church organist, and she's now a pastor's wife, and she plays for many, many of the students at the University of Virginia, where they live in Charlottesville. And every semester she plays for their juries, which is their final exams. And she stays busy in her music, and I'm so glad. I was afraid when she went to work with the statistics department that she would lose her music, but she plays for a lot of the weddings at the chapel there at UVA. And a favorite story of hers is she was there at the rehearsal to rehearse for the wedding she was going to play for the next day. And this group came in before her, and there were 12 bridesmaids and 12 ushers and the bride and the groom. and the preacher was not helping at all. And she said, can I help you get organized? And the groom said, oh, please, please do. And so she got them all marched in. You walk with him, you walk with her. And so they got through they were only allowed an hour practice, rehearsal time. So the next day, that wedding was ahead of hers, and she was there, and the groom said, oh, there's that lady that got us through rehearsal, and he handed her a check, unbeknownst to her. And so it's lovely the way, and she plays. I'll go up there and she'll walk through the house and sit down and play a little bit, practice them for something, because she's still into her music.
So she made a lot out of that $3
yes,
half-hour
yes,
lesson.
She did. And then at Polk, she went on and studied there too. Mm-hmm. So one of my children still lives in Winter Haven. He lives across the street from me and checks to make sure I'm okay. And one son lives in Key Largo, which is a nice place to visit. And she lives in Virginia, and the other son lives across the street. Wow. And the one son that we lost.
So I know you're very busy lady, and you do a lot of volunteer work.
Yes, I do now. I try to keep busy.
Some of it is with the Friends of the Winter Haven?
Friends of the Library.
In Winter
yes.
Haven. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the Friends of the Library is a place that people bring in books that that have read, and everything that we make goes directly back to the library for expenses. The books are very inexpensive, and we're right across the hallway from the library, and I look forward to that every week. I've met many, many friends. It's a wonderful work, and I enjoy it greatly. I really do.
How often do you volunteer there?
I work usually a couple times a month, and I go in the morning and open up, and then I'm through at 1 o'clock, and made some great friends there. It's been wonderful.
Growing up, where was the Winter Haven Library before?
Well, it started when I was a child. It started on Central Avenue, and it was just a frame building. And I can remember the children's section. My aunt used to take me, and it was just one little room, just a little tiny room with a big square table. And I could go in there and just pick books out and sit and read until she was ready to go. And then they built a bigger building, and next to the whole library was a bowling on the green, and my grandfather bowled on the green. And I can't remember seeing him bowl, but they had it fenced in, and it was just like bowling, but they bowled on the grass. There were no bowling alleys. Well, I don't know, I don't know if there were bowling alleys or not. And so then they finally got the lovely library downtown, and that's where I work now. And I also work at the museum, Winter Haven Historical Museum.
Where is that located?
That's located at the down on Lake Howard at the Women's Club building. And we've got a marvelous museum. Bob Gernert has just done a yeoman's job, and got some early pictures of Winter Haven. You can't believe the dirt streets, and he has done a great job. And then he has a big section on Cypress Gardens. That's a special favorite of his. And I go and work there every week, one morning, well, usually Saturdays, and then during the summer we're open on Mondays, so I go there and love it.
And then I know recently you were recognized with a Polk Pioneer plaque.
Yes,
so congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. I was so surprised.
That's with the Polk County Historical Association,
right,
which you also volunteer for. What
right,
do you do with
right.
them?
I do the registration. I have for maybe 5 or 6 years. And I worked with this friend. She was doing it, and then I went with her, and it was so helpful to get to know all these people. And so I look forward to that, their annual luncheon, and we fill a table, and I get to see, and now I'm getting so I know these people better, and I enjoy that very much.
And do you volunteer with your church at all?
Well, I did. When the children were growing up, we were very active in the church, and they were in all the youth organizations, the little things, and we were there. That was our second home. And I'm not as active now. I love to go to church. I was in the choir, but then as the older I got, the worse my voice got, and so I don't sing in the choir, but I enjoy going and hearing the choir now.
Well, you have certainly shared a lot of memories and changes in Polk County. As you reflect upon your life here in Polk County, can you elaborate on any specific memories?
Well, the Orange Festival. It was the crowning thing in the town every February, and they had a huge parade. And we would get down there early when the children were little. I can remember one parade, my sister-in-law decided that I should have her little girl, who was 6 months old at the time. That was our turn. And so I went with 5 children, 2 6-month-olds, and the oldest one was then 10. But the parade was so wonderful that they were well behaved, and I can remember sitting right by the Haven Hotel and watched the parade go by. But we look forward to those times. I miss some of the hotels that are gone, some of the buildings that are gone.
Like which ones?
Well, the Rose Art Hotel, the Ridgeland Hotel, the Lake Region Hotel is where CVS is, and sometimes I go through town and I think, well, there was a building there. What was that building? And it's gone. So I have trouble finding my way around town occasionally because those buildings are gone.
So the landscape has changed. What's a really old hotel down?
Haven Hotel is still there.
Haven Hotel is still there.
Yes. It was built in about 1913 or 15, I can't remember which. And it is not a hotel anymore, it is condos. It's been sold as condos now, but it still looks just like it did, except that the cars are different. That's about the difference. And I can remember in kindergarten, I was the conductor of the rhythm band. And we were a pirate band, and I dressed up as a pirate as directing that rhythm band with our sticks and our triangles and I can remember going as a kindergartner down to the Haven Hotel and putting on a show. I hadn't thought of that in a long time.
This is what happens whenever we do these, is you start reflecting back.
Yes.
But you know, you've had a long life here in Polk County,
yes.
And a lot of the things that are visible now, like Cypress Gardens, it's Legoland now.
Yes.
Right.
And I wish that they would open the gardens so that people could go if they wanted to just see the gardens, because the big tree is still there. And I went once, and it's such a long way to walk from the parking lot. It must be half a mile. And for me, a half a mile, or maybe I don't know how far it is, but anyway, it's out by where the Florida pool is. Mm-hmm. And that was a favorite place as growing up. And so I miss being able to go out to the gardens when I want to go. My aunt worked there, and I could go out and see the
another landmark that we still have is Bach Tower Gardens.
Yes. Bach Tower was that was a long way away back then. And we didn't go to Bach Tower. Maybe on Easter Sunday we would go to Bach Tower. But it is just like it was. Well, down at the bottom, the base is a lot of new buildings, but to get up to the tower itself, that would be a joy to me to be able to go inside the tower. But I've never been inside the tower. And someday maybe I'll get inside the tower. Maybe I'll volunteer over there and I can get inside.
I've seen pictures of people attending the Easter service, and they're sitting on orange crates.
Yes.
Would you do that?
Yeah. Oh, yes. We'd sit on the ground or orange crates. I could remember my mother telling the story of seeing the bells brought in on the train. The biggest bell took a whole flat car. It opened in 1929, the year, and so that was before I was born. But that was, she said those bells were huge, and how they got them up, I don't know how they got them up in the tower, but I would love to go see those bells.
What other landmarks can you think of?
Well, Lake Howard, there was the J.C.'s had a building down right out over the water, and they would rent it out, and we would go to dances, have dances there, and then that was torn down, and the old houses they're disappearing, and it's sad. It is real sad to see all these old houses now Lake Howard, I can remember when it was a dirt road around Lake Howard, and when they decided to pave that road, or widen that road, everybody was up in arms because that was going to ruin Lake Howard Drive, but it didn't. It was, it just made it more beautiful, and I drive around it at least once a week just to see what's going on.
Do you have any memories of the historic courthouse in Bartow?
In Bartow. No, I have memories more of late. I can remember it being a courthouse, and but we didn't come down very often. Sometimes we would detour and ride past it as we went out to Kissingen Springs, but I hopefully stayed out of trouble and didn't have to go to the courthouse. But that's a great museum too.
We like it.
And my son worked, when he was a late teenager, he worked as an electrician when they built the new courthouse. So he had a hand in that, and that's part of our legacy.
Well, we're starting to wrap things up here,
Okay.
and is there anything else you can think of that maybe I haven't asked you about?
Well, I can't think of anything right offhand. I love Polk County. I love Winter Haven. I think it's a wonderful town to grow up in. When I was young, I can used to not be able to go any place without seeing somebody I knew, and I can go for days not see another soul. But of course, our claim to fame was Publix, and the Haven Hotel, and the boat races on the lakes, and now we have the Cypress Gardens skiers. Some of the fellows used to ski out at the gardens, and now their children and their grandchildren are in that show. That they put a show on once a month, the third Saturday, and it's as good as the show ever was out at Cypress Gardens, and it's so special. Everybody takes a chair or a blanket, and we sit and watch the show.
What do you think makes Polk County so special?
Well, it's halfway between Tampa and Orlando. I don't want to live in either place, but they're close enough that I can get there. And so now we have Walt Disney World, and we have all those big places that we can visit, but we're not inundated with all of that traffic. I mean, we're inundated, but not that bad.
Well, you were living here in Polk whenever Disney was being built.
Yes.
How did everybody feel about that?
Well, we were just in awe to think that Walt Disney was going to come and build a park. And of course, it snuck up on us because nobody knew that he was buying all that property. And all of a sudden, he had all the property he needed to make it bigger than the place in California, and it sprang up. So sort of like Topsy, it just grew. And my son, one lives here in town. He worked at Disney when he was a teenager. Was a skier there and played. Not Pluto, the other one.
Goofy?
Goofy. Played Goofy. He was tall. And he tells a story about one of the first parades he was in. He was the big bad wolf. And the three pigs were on the float, and he was on the float, and he was chasing them around. And all of a sudden he looked. And the girl who was driving the float was very new at it and looked up, and the float was headed straight for the bigwigs, the VIP place where they were watching. And he thought, well, I got to stay in character, so he flexed his arms and he jumped off the float and he pushed it around the corner and flexed his muscles again and jumped back on. And so a little while later, he got called to the office and he said, well, I guess I lost my job because I, got out of character somewhat. And when he went in, he thought, well, he's out of a job. And the man said, Stephen, you have just come to the fore. You've saved the day, and we're very proud of you, and we want you to know that we are. So that's his favorite story.
Well, we could go on and on,
yes,
but
we could,
I think it's time to kind of wrap this up.
Yes.
I want to thank you so very much for sharing these wonderful memories, and I'm happy to live in Polk County, and I love talking to people who've grown up here and have stayed here. It's a wonderful place.
Well, you have been so helpful, LuAnn, and I appreciate you being here with me and getting me to pulling these stories out.
I know you've put this off for a while, but
yes, I have.
But we all appreciate what you're able to contribute back to our county, and I want to thank you about that. And I want to thank you for participating in this oral history program.
We thank you, LuAnn, for doing this
with the Polk Pioneers. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you.